One Piece has officially announced universal same time release legality for the sets coming down the line in 2026. That means we have uniform releases for both the East and the West. We will not have separated metagames coming down the line. And I can imagine folks like Meibatsu who make the online sim are just super happy for this. I wanted to not only go over this announcement, talk about some of the product releases, but also talk about some of the downstream implications and how actually insane something like this is. I think a lot of people agree in general that a uniform release is good for the game, but not a lot of people have thought about why something like that might be good. So let's go over the announcement itself. So this is the kind of video that was released. So pretty cool video here, pretty hype. Hey, yo, shout out to Cross. Cross taking the dub in the commercial. World is starting to move as one, right? That's the key here. Turn on my little purple filter light here. Sharing the same goal. Hardfest, right? So we have some previous stuff. Simultaneous worldwide release of products coming 2026. Big hype for something like this. So this is just really exciting overall. And these are some of the products that they talked about as well. So 2026 release in June. So this is next year. We have Starter Decks 23 and 28 being released in English and French first, before even Japanese and stuff like this. So English and French version players will be the pioneers studying the meta. Point two is 6 colors of decks releasing at the same time. So we see Bonnie, we see Buggy, we see Shanks, Luffy, Marshall, and Yamato here. Point three, 5 cards with new text in each color. So each color, there is in total 6 decks. That is 30 new cards. The leaders are Bonnie, Yamato, and new 4 Emperors. So the 30 brand new cards across the starter decks, which is really cool, really exciting next year. And again, we're going to get that simultaneous release, but it looks like English and French might get it for the first time before like Japanese. So that's kind of cool there. And then this is the kind of planned March through August release cycle for kind of 2025 here. So starter deck 21 in March. So this month here. And then we also have OP10 release, which is literally here. And then we have the double pack set. We have the illustration boxes, which are kind of interesting. And then August, we're going to get illustration boxes 3 and 4, and then kind of the special Dawn sets as well. So they'll adjust the product releases as they release all languages in 25. Looks like starter deck 23 to 28 released before Japan. So again, a lot of cool things in terms of products coming down the line, but the excitement of a simultaneous release is multifaceted. Now, when it comes to the metagame, let's take a look at this from a metagame perspective. So we have OP09. This is our current tier list for in the West. We haven't really started OP10 yet. Obviously the sim has it, but in paper you may not have kind of started it yet. But tier 1, Doflamingo here. Teach, Black Yellow Luffy, Rob Lucci. Lucci doesn't really get played too much, but this is just like a general tier list. It may not be like a full metagame breakdown, but we get an idea that Shanks is up there, Purple Luffy, all that good stuff. Now, when it comes to the metagame after this, let's look at OP10 before OP11 releases. So, you know, the banned and restricted announcement happens, and then we get an OP10 metagame that's completely unrecognizable. So the reason I mentioned the banned and restricted announcement is we have the OP09 metagame. That is the West. The West is then going to get an OP10 banned and restricted update in the middle of this month come March 16. Now, something may change, something may not. A lot of people talking about Moria, a lot of people talking about Jinbei, something to come out of the maybe the Teach deck. But if something comes out of Teach, something's got to come out of Doflamingo, all this kind of back and forth discussion. Now, if that ban happens, we won't actually get this metagame. So pretty much in the East essentially gets to play a whole metagame that we in the West will never get to experience. This is the current EBO2 OP10 metagame without the bans. But our EBO2 OP10 metagame will be affected by the bans because we see Doflamingo still at the top. We see the new hot talk of the town, green, purple Luffy, Marshall Teach up at the top as well, Lucci, purple Luffy, Shanks, Smoker, Bonnie, black, yellow Luffy. We won't get this metagame though. Because if something changes in the ban restricted announcement in March 16th, that means we will get an OP10 metagame that may be missing Jinbei, that may be missing something out of Teach, maybe missing ACOS Moria. Like if ACOS Moria is gone, Black Yellow Luffy is just completely unplayable. we may get a change that completely makes it so a metagame is unplayed by us, which is crazy. That means like all this information, all this data that was made by the East, because that was one of the advantages we get. The East gets to play a metagame like completely ahead of us at the West. We get all this data, all the ideas of like what's good, what's bad. We get to see all the tournament results and get to see what gets played. And so we can be better informed maybe of tech coming down the line, future plays, and just ways to handle decks against new leaders. But now is completely irrelevant because of this ban update. Now, of course, this is not so much so with previous metagames where we do get to see a whole meta ahead. So it's almost like the metagame is like boring. We don't really have like updates or changes. We're kind of just looking ahead altogether. And we get this like real like biased look at things because we don't even get to explore. A lot of the meta heads before this ban restricted update in the previous metas would just look at this metagame and just go complete with what's stock. There's no exploration whatsoever. But then the pioneers in the meta ahead in the East, they would be the ones exploring, kind of dedicating their time to testing and trying new archetypes and trying new cards and everything across old archetypes. But we don't really get that. We just get the meta. But now uniquely in the ban era of things, without simultaneous release, we get an OP10 meta that we will never get to play. Because if something does change, something will probably change in Doflamingo, which means something gets changed in Teach, and then we will not get to play this metagame because the leaders will become, you know, completely up and down in terms of what's playable and what's not. So this is going to be a big boon, a big benefit towards simultaneous release. Not only are we not going to have this confusion about metagames that we're not even going to be able to play, but we're not going to get boring metagames. We're going to be able to test with the East at the same time. We're going to be able to try out this cards that come out at the same time, try out new leaders, try out old leaders with new tech at the same time as the East. We're going to be able to collaborate with worldwide kind of people all over. Content and articles and discussions and tournaments are going to be more relevant to everybody. And that's where that cross-contamination is going to be very important. Because I think, you know, this was a discussion made kind of 2 years ago on Reddit. Will I be able to mix English and Japanese cards in a deck? Are foreign cards legal in play? No, only cards that are legal are printed in your region. But now with the simultaneous release, I don't know why this would be true anymore. And I think my prediction is further down the line in 2026, the increased accessibility of One Piece TCG cards is going to be top discussion because of the prices of certain cards and how they fluctuate. We know that historically, especially with TCG Player right now, Japanese cards on average are less expensive than those out in the West. And so now with simultaneous release, I don't see why something like this can't change in the future. We could get more cards inserted in the card pool, older cards that were seen maybe more accessible or sorry, more expensive, maybe less accessible, now become accessible through a Japanese market that had maybe a lot of bulk and like they didn't sell, or they just less expensive in the West, so they don't want to sell out that way. Now flood the market and become more available for a lot of people. I think in general, simultaneous release is going to be great from a metagame perspective, from a learning perspective, but also from a card accessibility perspective. I think down the line, my prediction is with simultaneous release, we will allow a legality of all languages across all regions, which will just be better for the game in general. That'll mean I can take my English cards, go to a Japanese tournament, I can play for those. I don't need to buy cards net new. And then also because of like, you know, cards being the same in general, right? Like we'll be able to tell through the arts, we know cards do. The barrier to entry to play is like almost kind of non-existent, right? This will also be better for data aggregate websites and content sites where you had to create different metagame pages, and now you could create them across. Like you could create a card database and a legality website and tier lists, and everything just becomes together all at once. You don't have an Eastern audience that no longer watches the content that I make in a Western audience, but you now have a Western audience that also has to be more aware of an Eastern audience that's making content that is now relevant to them. I think the information sharing and the improvement of the general One Piece TCG player base will just skyrocket altogether. And I think a simultaneous release for like multiple factors is very important. Now, I think a lot of people were like already aware of something like this. I know a lot of my audience may be a little bit more casual, very Nami specific, but I also wanted to highlight why, just in general, if you knew one point, you may not have known the other, highlight why something like this is really important when it comes to the One Piece TCG. And I'm so excited for the future of this game. I was definitely feeling a little bit weird about this game. I mean, I think it's because of the fact that like Nami was definitely seeing a bit of a downturn, but you know, it's fine. I'm here to play the archetype, but in general, I'm excited for the increased accessibility. It looks like the game's going in a great direction in terms of long term, and I'm just really excited to see where something like this can be taken. I'm just, I don't know. Let me know if I missed a point down below. Let me know how you're feeling about simultaneous release coming in 2026. The only criticism I have is Honestly, why isn't it sooner, right? The big thing that I'm thinking off the top of my head is like, with simultaneous release, does that mean that the East will get a longer metagame so that the West can catch up? Like, will there be a meta where like the East has to be there for like 4 or 5 months and then the West catches up to the simultaneous release? Or will the West just get 2 sets at once? That's kind of the thing that I'm really thinking about. How are we going to do that type of release? That's really the big question I think on everyone's mind. How are we going to do that release? Maybe it was announced in this and I'm just being completely dumb about like how they're releasing it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not reading into the information well enough, but that's the big thing on my mind. How will they handle that? There's already so many distribution issues, but hopefully if they make it so cards are both legal in Japanese and English at the same time, maybe the English vendors can also get a hold of Japanese cards and French cards, and even the French vendors can get a hold of Japanese and English, and the Japanese can get a hold of, kind of English and French and all that stuff. Whatever language barriers we have, hopefully there can be some cross-contamination in terms of the type of product that they can get, increasing accessibility, having more people be able to pre-order boxes, and just have more product flood the market so more people can buy cards, and just in general be a net positive for the game. But anyway, just super excited for this. Just want to put this out as a video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and just a great time to be a One Piece TCG player.